All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I'm Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners, and more specifically, Bitcoin versus the Bitcoin miners. This is a weekly edition. I want to talk about how Bitcoin is surging, the Bitcoin miners are struggling. Beyond that, I'm going to show you some information as to why I think this is happening. And then lastly, I'm going to show you some other information why I think the exact opposite of this should be happening. So an awful lot to go through. Please do us a favor and smash the like button. We're going for 500 likes on this video. Also, if you're new to the channel or you have not yet subscribed, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell. We did just reach 15,000 subscribers, so I do want to thank everybody for getting us to that goal. Okay, let's talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. I want to start out on this chart that's the week over week. Let's compare what Bitcoin did versus what the Bitcoin miners did. And before we get going, I'm going to tell you, in certain ways, I think this was actually the worst week that Bitcoin miners have had all year this year. And this is a year where there have been an awful lot of bad weeks, particularly over the last 17-week stretch. Okay, so let's get to the chart. All right, the first thing you're going to notice is in gold, as always, is Bitcoin. Bitcoin was up 8% this last week. An 8% move up in 1 week is large. This was a breakout. We're in the middle of a several week breakout. So the breakout continues. You're going to see also in purple, you're going to see the NASDAQ at 2%. So one of the things that we've been looking at is the performance of Bitcoin versus the NASDAQ versus the Bitcoin miners. The Bitcoin miners were following the equity markets, I think, over the last maybe 4 months, a lot more so than Bitcoin. I do believe that will change. This is not financial advice. I'm just giving you my opinions and going through the numbers, but I do think we're in for a change, and later in the video, I will tell you why. Okay, so the first thing that jumps right out at me on this page, and this is why I think this was a particularly bad week, rivaling one of the worst weeks for Bitcoin miners. While it was an excellent week for Bitcoin, every single one of the 19 Bitcoin miners that we follow on this channel performed worse than Bitcoin this week. Now, traditionally, these have been leveraged plays to the upside. We're now in a 17-week window where that has not been the case. We're going to go through that exact chart in a few minutes, but you can see this trend continues. In a week where Bitcoin was up 8% in the middle of a gigantic breakout, 15 of the 19 miners were actually in the red, meaning they had a negative week. They went down this week. Some of them were down drastically. So in the short term here, the Bitcoin miners are clearly broken. Okay, so at the bottom of this list, you're going to see Cypher was down 27% this week. But they were not alone. Mawson was down another 20%. Mawson has just had one bad week after the next. You're going to see, I believe, when we look at the chart later, this is the worst performing stock out of all the Bitcoin mining stocks this year. CleanSpark was down 16%. I did put out a tweet this week talking about how I think the Bitcoin miners are under attack, and specifically, I think CleanSpark is being targeted. CleanSpark was down disproportionately this week, but you're going to see they're not alone. Iris Energy was down 15%. TeraWolf was down 15%. Stronghold 14%. Core Scientific 13%. So a lot of these companies were down fairly dramatically in a week where Bitcoin had a fantastic week. This should have been a good week. In fact, there was one morning where the Bitcoin miners were off to the races. A lot of them were up between 15 and 20% early in trading, and then immediately reversed and all of a sudden tanked and ended up in the red. So something's going on in the short term. Again, I try to always remind everybody, if you are like me and you're more of a long-term investor, I do believe that the Bitcoin miners are a leverage play on Bitcoin. They've acted that way always in the past. Now, there's no guarantee of that in the future. And obviously, again, I have to tell you, this is not financial advice. I'm not recommending any of these companies. I'm going through all the data and letting you guys know just exactly what happened from a data standpoint. That's a look at what happened in this 1 week. So that's one of the reasons I would argue, although there are weeks where the Bitcoin miners have been down even more than this, based on the fact that Bitcoin had one of its best weeks, I do think this rivals one of the worst weeks of performance for the Bitcoin miners all year. This is a chart of the last 4 weeks. Really, the last 4 weeks have been a massive breakout in Bitcoin. So I want to compare what the Bitcoin miners have done in the last 4 weeks to what Bitcoin has done during this gigantic breakout. Bitcoin's up 39% in the last 4 weeks. We're now more than $5,000 higher than the previous high of the year for 2023, and you're going to see 17 of the 19 Bitcoin miners are underperforming Bitcoin even in this 4-week period of time. The Bitcoin miners should be outpacing Bitcoin. So this massive discrepancy here is going to take a little while to fix, if it gets fixed at all. The only two miners that outperformed Bitcoin are GREE and DMG Blockchain, and it's worth noting those are nano cap stocks. They are very, very small. They're two of the smallest Bitcoin miners. So all of the top 10 largest Bitcoin miners underperformed Bitcoin, and some of them underperformed Bitcoin by quite a bit. So other than the two nanocap stocks I just mentioned, you're going to see actually Bitfarms and RIOT are tied for first place, but they are still underperforming Bitcoin. Bitcoin up 39%, Bitfarms up 27%, RIOT up 27%. So they're lagging behind. They're not even a one-to-one play with Bitcoin in the course of the last month. So even these two that are near the top, to me, represent poor performance versus what our expectations would be. Even over a 4-week period, you see there's 6 Bitcoin miners that are in the red, while Bitcoin's been on a tear, up 39%. So even though these companies are not massively in the red, to be down in a period of time where Bitcoin is up 39%, it's taken out its high for the year multiple times. We're now $5,000 or $6,000 above its high for the year. This is extremely poor performance, and it gets worse than this. BitDeer is down 12% in the last month, Mawson's down 13%, and Any is down 15%. Most of this list, 17 of the 19 Bitcoin miners have underperformed Bitcoin in the last 4 weeks when Bitcoin's been on a gigantic run. Okay, now let's look at the last 17 weeks. So this is the last 4 months approximately, and things get even much worse when you look at it from this perspective. Thursday, July 13th was the high of the year for Bitcoin. Bitcoin hit about 31,800. We're now 24% above that. So while Bitcoin has had a massive breakout in this 17-week window, you're going to see at the same time, to reiterate what we discussed earlier, the NASDAQ is down 2%. So now here we go. All 19 of the Bitcoin miners that we follow are in the red, substantially in the red. The top performers, again, the top 3 performers are all really micro or nano cap stocks. GREE and DMG are down 25%. Those are nano cap stocks. Then we have Core Scientific down 31%. They're in Chapter 11, so it's really hard to judge the price action on this stock. So by the time you get to really one of the top 10 Bitcoin miner stocks, from Bitfarms on down, you've got all of the top 10 Bitcoin miners down somewhere between 32% and 78%. Something is broken in the short term with the Bitcoin miners. It just gets worse from there. If we go to the bottom of the list, you're going to see some of these are down between 50 and almost 80%. These are fairly catastrophic numbers. And remember, this is not a year. This is just a 17-week window. This is just a 4-month window. So these are monumental moves to the downside. And it's not like the market's been crashing. It's not like Bitcoin's been crashing. Bitcoin is at a new high for the year. And at the same time, you're seeing these disaster results in some of these Bitcoin miners. Okay, quickly, we'll take a look at year to date. This is a little better picture, and it puts things a little bit in perspective. For as bad as the last 4 months have been, the first 4 months of the year, the Bitcoin miners were on an absolute tear. At 1.4 months into the year, a lot of these Bitcoin miners were up 300, 400, 500, 600%. The majority of them, in fact. So some of this pullback is just to get them back down to reality. But I think we've had an overreaction in the other direction. Bitcoin's here in gold, up 125% year to date. So this is a spectacular year for Bitcoin. We really haven't entered the bull cycle in the 4-year Bitcoin cycle, but this is a big, nice move this year. And you're going to see that has resulted in most of the Bitcoin miners being in the green and some of them having good performance. However, they're not getting that leverage that they should be getting for the most part. Now, there are a few exceptions. Core Scientific in Chapter 11 is up 732%. They claim they will be out of Chapter 11 by the end of the year. We will see what ramifications that has on the stock. So buyer beware, that's all I'll say. Not financial advice, but keep your eye on Core Scientific as it comes out of Chapter 11. Cypher's up 432% year to date. So Riot and Marathon are right next to each other, up 206% and 181%. So they are a little bit of a leverage on Bitcoin, but not quite what we expect. We're starting to see some winners and losers. I've been talking about this for months on the channel. On the flip side, you've got Mawson down 60% year to date in a year where Bitcoin's up 125%. You've got Any down 49% and Stronghold down 19%. Those three Bitcoin miners are still in the red. Argo blockchain is just barely green at 6%. So I do think the market in particular is deeply worried about these four Bitcoin miners potentially not surviving. CleanSpark's up 83%. That's lagging Bitcoin. And then, of course, the Nasdaq's up 33% for the year. So the Nasdaq's actually having a very good year. It just pales in comparison to what Bitcoin is doing, up 125%. I'm only going to spend a second on market cap. This list stayed the same. The top 12 stayed in the exact same order, with the exception of the fact that Marathon went from second place to tied for first place. Riot and Marathon are in runaway first place for the largest by market cap. That has been true for the last several years. Then there's a gigantic drop-off down to Cypher at 759 million. And then we have another big drop-off to CleanSpark at 571 million. By the time we get to the end of the top 10, we're at $229 million. These are very small companies. Other than these two, and even these two are small cap companies, most of these companies are very close to or fit into micro cap status. Some of them are even nano cap status. Now I just want to show you guys quickly some of the reasons I think that this is going on. There seems to be a lot of narratives out there that are really bashing the Bitcoin miners. The title of this article is Why a Bitcoin ETF is Making Bitcoin Miners Nervous. So this is something that's going around that I've heard a lot of people talking about. I've gotten a significant amount of comments and questions on this. A lot of people think when we finally do get an ETF, it's going to be bad for the Bitcoin miners because money is going to go out of the Bitcoin miners into the Bitcoin ETF. Let me know if you want to know why I think this is absolutely totally incorrect. I think the opposite of this is true. My quick answer to the question, is an ETF good or bad for the Bitcoin miners? My answer is it is good for the Bitcoin miners. It is very good in my opinion. Again, not financial advice. If you guys want to know more about this, let me know in the comments and I will do a deep dive on why to me this is just ridiculously false in my opinion. Okay, here's another big thing that's going around. If large-scale miners are to survive, the Bitcoin price must hit 50,000. This is from thestreetcrypto.com. They're saying 50,000. Most of what I'm seeing and hearing out there is 60,000. Some people are saying 70,000. This is another thing that, in my opinion, is just fear, uncertainty, and doubt being spread. I will do the math. I am going to do some miners in particular and talk about exactly what price they need to be at in order to survive the halving or thrive during the halving. So I think this talk of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 is also very incorrect. Now, again, I will reiterate, there are going to be winners and losers. So some of the Bitcoin miners, this may be true for, particularly some of the small cap Bitcoin miners. But most of the miners that I cover on this channel, that I do deep dives on, that we talk the most about, in my opinion, this is not true at all. In fact, I think this number is grossly incorrect. So this is another thing that I think is hurting the Bitcoin miners. It's one of the reasons the Bitcoin miners are underperforming. The vast majority of the public, I think, believes that Bitcoin needs to be at $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000, or else these Bitcoin miners are going to be in big trouble and/or go out of business. So my personal opinion is that that is absolutely incorrect as well. Now I'm going to talk about a reason why I think the exact opposite should be happening. I think the month of November is going to be the most profitable month of the year for the Bitcoin miners, and it's probably going to be the most profitable by far. Number one, the Bitcoin price on average is the highest it's been of any month of the year. In addition to that, the Bitcoin fees have gone up drastically. This is the second time this year that the Bitcoin fees have spiraled upward. So here's an article. Bitcoin mining revenue hits yearly high amid ETF-fueled rally. Bitcoin mining revenue is hitting a high for the year because Bitcoin's hitting a high for the year. So that's just simple math. But this is only one part of the picture. Okay, underneath you're going to see Bitcoin mining revenue has topped its previous yearly high seen in May of 2023 when demand for ordinals inscriptions clogged the network. So that is actually happening again. On the average, the Bitcoin fee can be anywhere from 0.1 Bitcoin to 0.2 Bitcoin. Sometimes it gets up to 0.3 or 0.4 Bitcoin. That's been the average over the last several years. We're in another period of time where several of these Bitcoin blocks are having fees greater than 1 Bitcoin. A few of the blocks were over 2 Bitcoin. There was a block where the fee was over 3 Bitcoin. So that's more than 10 times the normal fee. So these things add up. So when the November operational reports come out, I would expect you're going to see many of these Bitcoin miners have their best month of the year, some of them maybe by far. So while we have on one side, in reality, the Bitcoin miners may be having their best month of the year operationally and financially, on the other side, we have their stocks doing maybe their worst month of the year. This is not financial advice. You guys need to make your own decisions, but you can see I do think opposite things are happening here. While certain Bitcoin miners are excelling operationally and financially, their stock is performing very poorly. So if you believe that that's going to turn around, potentially some of these really should be on people's watch list. These are very, very high risk, high reward stocks, so please invest carefully. If you made it this far, please remember to subscribe to the channel, smash the like button, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next video.